Good afternoon, everybody. This is Hunter Mozingo bringing you your daily market insight video for Monday, August 16th. It is about 10 minutes after market close here in Jacksonville, Florida, 4:11 Eastern time to be exact. And in today's edition of the market insight video, we're going to highlight today's standouts. And I've also got three very attractive risk reward setups that I think are going to be intriguing to our listeners, spanning across three different sectors as well, very different parts of the market. So we'll look at those towards the end of the video. Before we do that, let's talk about what just happened. So stocks bounced back after a poor open. Lots of stocks plus the indices were down pretty significantly, or a relatively decent pullback to start the day. International issues, specifically in the Middle East, at the forefront of focus, causing a lot of concern, as well as other data coming out of China. And obviously the Fed is an ongoing concern, what their policy is going to be moving forward. So lots of things in focus. A really, really weak open. Markets clawed back. As you can see, the S&P finished up 0.26%. The Q's slightly green, just a tiny little bit, 0.04%. Dow up 0.31. Midcaps and the Russell, the laggards today. The Russell down about 1%. Midcaps down about 0.25%. The market state remains the same uptrend with small SML in red there. That basically is same scenario. Small caps still struggling to get back above their moving averages. Mid caps really kind of sitting right on it for the time being. We do have a small change to the trend gauge as well. You've got the market leaders going back to having the small arrow pointing towards neutral, and that is because a lot of leading stocks either sliced through and reclaimed moving averages. Some have broken down a little bit. So we're seeing some less than ideal action in some leading stocks, and then still some okay action in some others. And we'll get into those charts here in a moment as well. And before we do that, as I always do, let me highlight the team here at Revere. If you have any questions about the video, about any of the stocks or ETFs I cover, anything like that, send me an email, hunter@revereasset.com. If you'd like to find out more about Revere and what we do, or our investment strategy, or our services, call 855-732-5932, or you can email anybody, Dan, Tim, Hunter, Merrill, Alex, or Don at revereasset.com as well. So let's get to the charts here. As we mentioned, the S&P finishing green, essentially undercutting the 8-day exponential here and bouncing and finishing up about 0.25%, like we said. Still not very extended, but slightly, a little over 3% beyond the 50, a little over 1.5% above the 21. And the Qs here at about 1% above the 21 after undercutting this morning as well. So the Qs came down to 363.70, and I'm going to show you on a 5-minute chart how they finished the day strong. As you can see, it was a very sharp sell-off in the morning here on the NASDAQ, followed by a strong close to finish at pretty much highs of the day here. So the Qs touch 363.70. You're probably going to want to set an alert there just so you know if that low gets taken out. But undercut the 21 and reclaim the 8. That's been a recurring theme with the Qs, or touching the 21 and then reclaiming the 8. The Dow continued its strength. As you can see today, looks very similar to the S&P's candle. A lot of those stocks came back nicely. And when I say Dow type stocks, that's typically your banks, your oils, well, not necessarily oils, but your more value oriented plays, less growth oriented. And lastly, mid caps, like I said, sitting above their moving averages right on the 8, and small caps, the laggards, still struggling to get back above the 50 and the 21. And before we go into the actual individual stocks, let's look at TLT. So stocks were at their worst when TLT was at their highest, and that goes for growth stocks too, which typically benefit when TLT goes up, because that means bank rates or yields are coming down. But as TLT kind of retreated throughout the day off this 150 level, stocks came back. So for what it's worth, maybe it's a reaction to extreme volatility. Equities acted a little weird around this time frame here as well, when TLT got a little bit erratic and started having some pretty volatile moves. But TLT staying above these moving averages, the 21, the 8, the 50, the 200 that got back above those after undercutting here last week. So that technically that's a good sign for growth stocks in particular, but equities, that the yields are coming back to earth a little bit after a strong move. So let's get into the leaders for the day. This is Apple sticking its head above 150 and actually getting above 151. It actually got above 150 early this morning, pulled back to the lows of the day, as you can see, 146.47, and finished at the highs of the day. So a very strong finish for Apple, as well as a very strong finish for big tech. We saw Amazon undercut the 200-day and reclaim today and finish pretty strong as well. Google, Facebook, all having relatively nice days. Dexcom, and I should mention Apple is owned in Grotection. Dexcom owned in Grotection, up 3% today. A nice little bounce off the 21, even though it didn't quite make it all the way there. Upstart, another name owned in Grotection, not necessarily finishing the strongest. You can see it was down 1%, but holding up well on a day where the markets really were pretty tumultuous early this morning. Growth stocks having some pretty sharp declines, holding this 200 level for the time being. We'll see how that holds up. It looks like it's down after hours. I'm not sure what's driving that news. Home builders, DHI, ITB, which is your ETF here, LEN, Lennar. These names were strong today. You can see they were all green. However, most of these names finished significantly off the high. So LEN was up closer to 2%. DHI was up closer to 2% at their peak. They finished up about 0.75%, but nonetheless, a name that showed relative strength today. Celsius, another name that was green towards the end of the day. It ended up finishing slightly down, but holding on above the 21 EMA. And a few more here on standouts for today. Zscaler did not finish green, but did bounce off the 21 nicely, get back above the 8-day, not down very much at all. A few more here. Net ended up being pretty strong as well, bouncing off the 21. Nice comeback for Net. And XLV, very nice day for the healthcare ETF. This has been on a really nice run here, going all the way back to April. After this little test of the 50, it has really been moving. Great follow through today on XLV. So let's get to some of the attractive setups, as well as I'm going to cover a few of these laggards because I think they're interesting. First, let's touch the dirty 30 stocks I mentioned last week. So DraftKings got back above that 200, undercut it, sitting on the 8 here. I would really want to see DraftKings get back above 53. 53.25 is exactly where the 200-day is, but not necessarily anything wrong with that. You just would like to see that 200 hold. Ideally, it gets back above. Palantir has held up where it should after an earnings gap. And lastly, Unity Software, nothing really wrong with this one either. It's pretty extended. So those were the three I covered last week, all still holding up relatively well. A couple of names you want to pay attention to maybe now that we've got some of these international issues in focus, your aerospace and defense, particularly RTX, Raytheon Technologies, a strong reversal today to reclaim some of those moving averages. That's a relatively good looking chart there. And then also LHX, which appears to be the leader for the space. That's L3 Harris, really strong today as well. Another risk reward type of area that you could look at here is Roku, back to the 200. It didn't hold it necessarily, did finish at the top third or so of top quarter of the range today. I would just watch and see if this can get back above that 360 level, give you a few closes above 360 before I did anything. But it is a leading stock with about 1,300 funds in it, pretty significant amounts of revenue. They're profitable. A name to watch on the 200-day, just like Amazon, the titans or the mammoths off the 200-day. You want to watch those huge companies with lots of funds in them when they get to those levels. One of those attractive risk reward names here is MOS. This is a stock that made a really strong move in the chemicals agriculture space to get back above these moving averages, now kind of retesting them on lighter volume. I think this is a pretty attractive setup here on MOS. And then also in the same area is NTR, not quite as close to the moving averages, but a strong move on NTR, a big gap up, and holding up pretty well right here at the 8-day exponential. This chemicals agricultural industry group was one of the strongest in my data set that I analyze every weekend. Made a really strong move over the course of last week, I should say. FCX is another one that you could throw in that attractive risk reward. I would want to see this get back above 37, as well as get back above the 8, which is pretty much 37.50. So I would set alerts in this vicinity. Excuse me, I think I set that for 27. Let me try that again. 37 and 37.50. Another one of those that are setting up as an attractive risk reward opportunity here. A few more names for you. Figs reported earnings last week, came all the way back to 40 today, and reclaimed or retested these moving averages pretty much to a T and bounced off of them. Figs acting pretty well, although it's been pretty volatile the last couple of days. And last couple here, as far as attractive setups go for risk reward, here is Square reclaiming the 21 after undercutting. I mentioned this on the podcast, maybe even on last Thursday's video. I said keep an eye for this one to retest 260, the 21, possibly undercut the 21 and reclaim. It just has a tendency and a history to do that. So time will tell what happens from here. But the positive is light volume pullback to this undercut of the 21, 260 area, but a reclaim of that 21 EMA. And last attractive setup here, Caterpillar, getting back above the moving averages and then bouncing off that 50-day today, while albeit it is on low volume, but you see the volume on the breakout past those moving averages here as well. So that's going to wrap the video up today, everybody. Thank you for listening. As always, email me if you have any questions or comments on any of the stocks or anything I covered. And I will see you on this Thursday's video. Excuse me. Have a great week, everybody.